Welcome back to #Colonizecannabis podcast episode 1 to volume 2. Special guest, great appearance coming here by Rick Moriarity of highnorthlabs coming out of Ontario. And Rick is involved in a program that brings us a mutual acquaintance out of Ontario that way too, out of Ottawa. Guelph, Ontario, I guess it would be, through Paul Valder and the Purity IQ group. With no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, as long as I've waited, Rick Moriarity, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So, Rick, like in that short introduction, exactly where in Ontario abouts are you? Are you like very close to Toronto, that kind of, or like closer?
Absolutely. I can see Toronto right outside my window. We're about 100 meters north of the border of Toronto. We're just on the north side, basically, of Steeles Avenue, which is the border of Toronto. So yeah, Toronto is right there, but technically we are located in Woodbridge, Ontario. So
Very
still
cool.
Part of the GTA and York region, but yeah, very, very local to Toronto and easily accessible. So it's great.
Excellent. So, I mean, quite a distance between us, Rick, and it's interesting because everything up until meeting recently here has been obviously for us through e-correspondence, email, and initially with your colleagues at your department, both in the lab area or client care, exactly, and also finance. So one would be that I'm a participant in the PIQ Grower Project, and as you see here, I have a plant, SOR 2018-144. This Jamaica Kush is a snipping that survived now roughly at around going in around the 30-day mark. So very still just out of my nursery not long ago, right? But survived from a flowering plant that you will soon have a product from me this way for my entrance into that program. And in some of my previous, so I've recently appeared with Respect My Region in the North American Weed Tour. And in that process, I've also disclosed my involvement in the program and the importance behind the quality assurance measures, whether myself as a small home grower here in Manitoba, where you can only grow in Manitoba if you are medically certified, as opposed to obviously out east in the Ontario, where so much of the industry actually kicked off. One, we have differing systems provincially, where you're up brick and mortar. Manitoba's operating by hybrid, and that situation you're in there is absolutely phenomenal. It's blowing up right now, and I'm like, as far as that goes, in your proximity and your involvement, we're looking at 3 years of regulation. You would definitely, obviously, seen a huge start to an evolvement, I guess, you know what I mean? Like a creation of new systems, policy changes, all of that kind of good stuff. So in the next few minutes, as part of your introduction, if you could just enlighten us a little bit as far as maybe what you had done previous to the industry, becoming the situation what you're involved with now at High North, exactly what you do, and definitely is that industry absolutely like swarming around you in the nest as that information and the product flows into Manitoba?
Yeah, thank you. So it is, I do think it is flowing quite a bit around here. There, like when you even look on my street, for example, multiple neighbors are growing in their backyard, right? That likely would never have been growing had it not been legalized. So in that sense, it's definitely flourishing. A lot of the clients and producers now are coming out a lot smaller craft grows, for example, are coming online, and that's starting to really bring a lot of high quality product to the market. Whereas before we were seeing a lot of say middle of the line quality product, and as people were trying to grow at scale, where before they were never really allowed to grow at scale before it was legalized. They're always, growing in a basement or something along those lines, or mass outdoor. But growing inside at scale is definitely a lot more difficult than one would assume. So that definitely changed a lot over the past now year or so, with all the other smaller craft growers coming online, bringing some really beautiful product and really caring about the end quality product. Has been such a positive change over the last year or so to this industry, from what was originally when originally started. There certainly was some quality product out there, but not as much as there is now. And it's great to see we got over 700 licensed producers now, more in the pipeline too to be licensed.
Nice.
So that I'm looking forward to seeing all the new high quality products. I think that's what's really important. There's a niche out there for the lesser quality product, the price and that kind of stuff, but there still can be some quality product at a cheaper price. And that is coming to the market. You are seeing that. I was in Quebec this weekend for Thanksgiving and went to the SQDC where that's where they're allowed to sell the cannabis. And there was $25 eighths, right, of some quality product and in a little tuna can and everything, right? So it is nice to see some of those prices get down to more realistic, where the quality is now on par with that. And then to go on your other question where you're asking about where I came from and everything. So I started growing about 22 years ago.
Awesome.
And processing, making a little bit of honey oil and mostly hash. Back then, I was very fond on hash and growing. So, but then it was still highly illegal, right? So once I started growing and messing with the electrical and everything, I did enjoy that. So I did pursue a career. I became an electrician. It helped a lot of friends set up grows with their lights and electrical and that kind of thing, right? Was on an online community where you still had to be incognito on say who you were and that kind of stuff, because of the, not worried that the police might be knocking on your door for simply growing some medicine. But what I mean by medicine is I think it can be used therapeutic, wellness, recreational, or for medicinal reasons. And a lot of the medicinal reasons are very valid, and it's important that everyone has access to that who needs to. But I think we need more education. As I mentioned, I was in Quebec, so I was at my aunt and uncle's, and I brought some topical, for example. Oh no, I don't want to get high. No, topicals are not going to get. They're not going to be psychoactive or intoxicating at all. It's going to really help. Oh, you have sore feet, no problem. Put some on. My uncle put some on my aunt's feet. Felt better almost right away.
Okay.
It's like, wow, where can I get this? I'm like,
right.
So education, I think, has got to go a long way, and we really, Health Canada and whoever else really needs to, I believe, promote more education around cannabis, its use, its effects, all that kind of stuff. So sorry I kind of went off in a tangent there to go back on where I started. So then one of my best friends growing up, my brother's best friend growing up, John, he had started this company called High North, where he found a void in the cannabis industry when it comes to testing and turnaround times, and also not being able to explain a certificate of analysis and what it means. Some of these labs that were, say, pharmaceutical, environmental, or whatever else, and then they decided to get into cannabis too. So he found that opening, that need for more cannabis driven laboratories. So he tried to get me involved. I just had my first kid and everything, so I was a little bit hesitant, and I was doing well in construction. So I held off a little bit, but then he convinced me to come on board. So I came on board, and then we ended up raising some money. We purchased this property and built out High North Laboratories, and then awesome. the rest is history. We've got a lot of great clients. There's a lot of great people in the industry, and we love to see the high quality products, especially now as we keep seeing more and more high quality products. We're doing sample of the week or bud of the week, and there's so many to choose from now. It's getting difficult. Where when we first started, it was like, wow, this is a real standout, sample of the week. But now there's we could almost be doing sample of the day. But to be honest, the only reason we can't right now is I don't have the time, right? Because it's myself who's doing that. So as we grow, we may look into bringing on more samples of the week, samples of the day, or whatever the case may be. But it's just great to see that the industry is it's flourishing, right? And,
right.
And more quality is coming to market, because that's what the consumers are demanding.
You like that. That is, you nailed so much stuff there. It was not absolute, there's no tangent there, man. You nailed and bringing it full circle in so many ways. The education, number one, anyone following us at this point now, and those that are going to find that through and through, whether it was the beginning a year ago or what we present now. Education here in Manitoba, 19 plus public cannabis education, but geared up, obviously we're getting our hands down to the US now, 21 plus. So as your province applies, either way, that's what we are. But even breaking that stigma even more, moving that education though into the system where it actually is going to thrive and flourish, and that is to some of the youth under 19, or under 18, inappropriate. So I mean, we take it back at junior high sex education. Well, cannabis education, as you mentioned, realistically should become parts of that, because that young, curious mind is also, as much as it's impacted differently by cannabis or hemp, or medically or not proven to either how, that same effect is going to be like the psychological component of curiosity is going to remain. So, I mean, bringing that information, and I mean, I have a 16-year-old son we have a 16-year-old son, right? So that open dialogue, there are things that I learned from him, even in all of the days I'll spend with my nose in certain books on cannabis or at the internet, the street slang and the mentality of where that 16-year-old person is, when it comes to cannabis. And it's interesting, man, because they're a huge demographic. I mean, that's not just my own child with those types of ideologies right now about what it is, right? So that whole standardization process, whether it is in the lab and the COAs and regulations and policies, the standardization on education has to also become part of that whole platform. So that is a big portion of it. Like you mentioned, Flourish. We are also Flourish, consulting previously. So a bit of a kick up for us was that Indigenous consultation services and cultural awareness, culturally appropriate training, youth role modeling. So 2007, I was awarded a National Aboriginal Role Model Award. So all of that had eventually snowballed, because I was a cannabis consumer in most of those. So I've consumed cannabis in Ottawa, right? Prior to legalization, New York, Mexico, man, very similarly. And from the time I learned very young, as an adult, 19, but exposed culturally in the cannabis community and cannabis culture, my green thumb, I also practiced that quite early at, beginning at 19, off and on university, a plant here and plant there. And it was never anything that was uncommon in the environments that I was accustomed to, which were, not grow operations. They were professional people that as I began to volunteer and be involved with organizationally, right? That has always been, for 2 decades, cannabis has been here in Canada and North America, it's obvious. So also bringing that back, man, where you touched upon, we mentioned Ontario, kind of coming out of the gate stronghold, brick and mortar style. You're hitting the 700 marker on growers, licensed producers. Here in Manitoba, we're floating still at around the 20. And that projection for Canada from Health Canada themselves originally has, in a year from now, October-ish 2022, for Manitoba to have 100 growers minimally. So that's a huge climb. Yeah, it's going to be great for sure. And it opens the doors for many people. And we're hoping, and I know I'm not alone when I talk to other Manitobans that have become more familiar with us, and retailers, especially bud tenders that I talk to, in what we do. We also have Pyrogere Cannabis Incorporated, which is on the back burner. And that's been I shouldn't say on the back burner. It's growing, it's simmering, so to speak. And the ingredients of that are coming together, and people are familiar, because it's part of our backlinking process as we become more branded with Flourish Ventures Limited. And that whole process that I take on that approach is sharing the statistics or pointing people in the right direction on how is Manitoba when we do hit the 100 mark. So we have Flourish Ventures Limited. If you visit our website, the hemp and cannabis rope and sales, kind of idea behind the ship is our brand, and we're not a cannabis brand, Flourish Ventures Limited. So we don't target or appeal to youth as a cannabis promotion. And we've separated our platform to where we are today right now. And so by bringing that, I project and want to be more involved in that process of farm gate. And lately, and here in Manitoba, as the information flows, what I've become familiar with is that system in Ontario seems to be taking off quite well. And that whole smaller system of food, well, even at federal legislation, very often in the ag sector of things like that, food or farm or table, was it food to sale?
Farm to table, I
Farm
think
to table, right.
Yeah,
so I mean, if we're familiar to the platform, here it's applying into cannabis. I'm looking at helping Manitoba hit that 100 mark with my wife and I as Flourish Ventures Limited, and recently hiring our technical assistant. So keeping everything full circle, including our social media, all that's going to become very more prominent in our positioning right now in Manitoba. And that whole concept right then and there comes to that. When we can pull Pyroger to cannabis together, we would want it to look at something like that. Very craft medical grow, for sale medical grow licensing. And then as regulations lift and CBD becomes a more regulated product, looking at a larger outdoor manageable crop hemp. So we are positioning all of that stuff into play. Tell me a little bit more about Ontario's rollout, where they're at right now, the farm gate, how it's impacted. I know you mentioned the smaller, the batches that come in, the more craft product, you're seeing multiples of it. And is that going to slow down at all for Ontario? And what does Manitoba have to look forward to?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to slow down at all. I mean, the demand for cannabis is only growing. People even from other countries are trying to speak with Canadian producers. I want your product. Israel and Europe and
right.
Mexico and all these other countries are speaking to Canadian producers to try and get their product exported into or imported into their country, exported out of Canada. So the demand nationally and internationally seems to only be growing. When it comes to just Ontario, Farmgate has been doing pretty well, I think. Now Station House, as you mentioned, Bull Rider store is going to be opening very soon in Brampton. Thrive Cannabis and Greybeard Cannabis, they opened theirs a little while ago. They're down by Lake Erie. I can't remember the name of I think it's near Port Dover. Maybe I'm wrong though. And then also RC Cannabis Supply in Etobicoke, not too far from us, has opened their farm gate store as well. So those are the four that I'm aware of. There very well may be more, and if there is, you have to add on to them. I'm not sure, and hopefully there are more that are coming. It's great because there's a couple that are local to us, local to me here, that I could drive and go check out when Bull Rider and RC as well. The other two are a little bit farther of a drive for myself, and I think that's one of the things with the farm gate is you have to be where your production is, right? A lot of the productions, they're not downtown Toronto, right? So and where real estate is so expensive, and if you're going to have a large grow, then now you also have to have but you have to also have a retail aspect to do the farm gate. So exactly. Yeah. I think within the city that's going to be very difficult, but outside the city or the city and the outskirts and smaller towns, that's going to be very cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of those open. I can't wait to check out all four of those that I brought up.
Awesome.
It's going to be it's cool, and I wish they could do more, like, selling even alcohol, food, other little things like that. It would be kind of cool. Visit the grow up and sit down, have a meal and that kind of thing.
Right.
A little bit more of a tourist aspect almost to it. Not something you're going to every day, but yeah, that would be pretty cool. And I think eventually perhaps the regulations may relax on that. As you mentioned, the regulations with CBD. Are you anticipating, you think that it will become a natural health product type regulation for CBD only?
Not entirely CBD, and its multiple forms as well. So I mean, we're also looking at another discussion on the table about Delta 8 products, right?
Yeah.
And Delta 10. So I mean, looking ahead at some of the extractions that, whether medically or recreationally, one, I think ultimately we see it here in Manitoba, and it's a common in Canada, pet nutrition. Yeah. And then the growing demographic of Canadian physicians who have been familiar to, but opening up to the practicing of that, as well as child medication. So whether it's THC or CBD product that way, right? So I mean, is looking down the road at some of those regulations lifting, And then but yeah, I mean, so the CBD, definitely the hemp production. And why I would project down that as far as some of the medians and to what we're going to hit with that stuff. In my last discussion with our CTLS consultant, what she was indicating then, if we were, and why we're looking, so when I mentioned that we're looking at the possibility of obtaining land or land and getting out of town onto an estate, I guess, or starting our estate. And then that also includes our CTLS buildup on what the site would look like overall. And so when we pitched in the hemp production, coming from a hemp producer who is looking to build with us if we obtain the land, that's obtaining the hemp license right now for Manitobans is part of this process I mentioned. It's almost guaranteed for one to be less than 60 days. So wow. with that in mind right now being brought to the table, then I'm looking at even previous discussions that have to do with the rollout of legalization in 2018, which had for an instant some CBD regulated product before it was withdrawn in revision, right? And or amendment, sorry. Then those individuals that I've connected with, they haven't really gone anywhere. So their involvement still in other organizations and such, pretty much that's where I'm looking, are indicating that at some point those regulations will be pulled back in. And to what extent, who knows, they could be, right? We could end up sitting on hemp that is used only for textiles and maybe not medication for anybody or anything. But the idea, the open mind concept and looking at it all so far has guided us fairly well to where we're going. I don't hesitate to reach out for affirmations and confirmations, and then taking the feedback on something that it doesn't work or looking at altering our plans that way. But yeah, I feel strongly, man. Like I don't see how they or the governments, or even like when we look at it globally, where countries and states that are operating in CBD, like Franny's Pharmacy, for example, and the stronghold in the hemp industry and the CBD extraction process for Medicaid pharmaceutical specifically, you know, if COVID and as it's impacted, if the cannabis industry has played its part in COVID recovery for that level of government, then CBD regulations definitely wouldn't impede any of that planning, right? It's just they're going to take the right people involved on how does it roll out and what isn't. So I mean, you look at some of those products that are being labeled harmful, and even all of that still brings it full back circle to your initial kickoff on the discussion on the labeling, packaging, and kicking it off with the hard time reading the COAs. And so before we get too far gone and then pulling it back, if we can look at some of that from your perspective. So taking it, obviously recognizing the weakness in the labeling and packaging and the brand marketing, to the evolution of highnorthlabs, and now the labeling and packaging as you might see it coming in on product from licensed producers, whether it meets requirements or not, how it's going out, future recommendations on how that's coming. You and I both have acknowledged certain things here, and one of the public acknowledgements I've made recently on LinkedIn had to do with the suggestion on one. I've seen a fantastic upgrade to a Canadian labeling for a brand, which comes fully loaded terpene repna, or like a terpene profile, where its placements are full-on cannabinoid, like overall total cannabinoid readings, specific high notes in its hybrid state or whatever of the flower. And it is, I believe, from out of Ontario. I didn't jot it on my list here today. I'd have to dig it up out of there, but I made a public comment on it because of the reality that sometimes through all the brand labeling, through all the packaging, and the things you've seen come around that way, the whole component of previous to where some of these places I mentioned, I have previously purchased cannabis and consumed it safely. It came at times in twisted off end of a grocery bag, right? And that cannabis stayed perfectly well until it was consumed. It might have dried out a little bit more, too dry for a joint, right? It hits the bong or the pipe. So is that something you're seeing? Is that potential? When do we get alleviation on brands to really highlight their products in Canada potential? Like, where do you stand with that? Is it simple as eventually coming air packed in a tight little package with all of the information you really need on just say a tag or something, right? Like those old little bags of gum candies you used to take when we were kids, like the golden bags in it.
So I think it is difficult too with the regulations, and you're dealing with not only Health Canada regulations, but you're dealing with whatever provincial body you're selling it to, or if you're selling it to a medical platform like Shoppers or Shelter or something like that, that then will sell to their medical patients. You're dealing with also their specific regulations on top of whatever the cannabis regulations may be speaking to. So I think there needs to be a little bit, definitely a change to the regulations to loosen them up a little. And I don't mean just, remove the regulations and let them do whatever they want. No, not at all. No. But they need more flexibility. It's a natural product. You've dried it. You've hopefully cured it. And then you're ready to test it, package it, label it, and sell it. But all of that takes time. So we're doing our best for turnaround time to get them the COA as quick as possible so that they can then order their labeling. And then once they get the labeling, they can package it, and then what? They have to also sometimes sit on it for a while, or they sell it to a provincial body that then sits on it for a little while till they're ready to sell it, or to the medical platform. So then it just takes longer and longer, and you look at the package date, and some of it is difficult to get out there as quick as possible. Again, it should go through all the proper procedures, proper steps, but there needs to be more flexibility in those proper steps to get it to the market quicker, get it into the consumer's hands quicker, and of course, obviously, safely. We don't want anything with contaminants getting out to the market, and we only want, or preferably want, at least choices for sure when it comes to quality. Some people are maybe on a budget, may want more flour, cheaper flour, and maybe they're making their own edibles that they prefer because there's only 10 milligram limit here by Health Canada. Myself, I have a low tolerance, but I know a lot of people that have a huge tolerance, like my partner, John, for example, or even my wife. They both have high tolerances. 10 milligrams is nowhere enough. And then you don't want to be munching on the sugar or whatever else just to hit that right dosage for yourself. So certainly around the edibles, around the packaging and labeling. And then when it comes to the labeling, it is difficult too, right? We get one representative sample. Health Canada has not regulated the maximum lot size. So that's up to the producer. So if they want to make 200 kilograms, 600 kilograms, 60 kilograms, whatever they want as their max batch size, or their batch size, that's up to them. And then they only need to take one representative sample from that and submit it to their laboratory for testing for both quality and contaminant for the label. So that, and as a longtime grower, I know that certain strains too have way more variability when it comes from bud to bud, plant to plant within the same room, all coming from the same mother even. Other strains could have almost bang on. Every bud you grab is almost the exact same every time you test it, no matter what, top, mid, you know what I mean? This plant, that plant, left side, right side. But other ones are extremely, it can be extremely different. So there's more of a range. As far as the terpenes, I definitely think that those should be posted on the label. I'm a big believer that total THC, well, it's not just me, there's plenty out there, and that's part of the education. Total THC is not potency. That is not what determines the potency. That's your total THC, which is about one of 5 or 6 different factors that will affect the potency on an individual. Everyone's endocannabinoid system is different. As I mentioned, I have a low tolerance. John, my partner, my wife, they both have high tolerances.
That's right.
So, and it doesn't matter, if you're big, small, male, female, whatever gender, does not matter. Everyone's endocannabinoid system is different. So total THC is not mean potency. And also a lot of producers that, especially at the start, that I've found, that I've toured some of the facilities and with my growing background, they may do a great job in producing the product. And then they are in such a rush to get it to the market, that they mess it up and do not have high quality products because they're not properly taking the time to dry it. They're not curing it at all. or any, and then if they need to, if they're irradiating or anything else like that as well. So to get the product to the market quicker is going to be a big help in having that freshness, that, you know, crack in that jar, that bag, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And having the proper labeling on there, whether it is a range or if it is this particular sample, or this particular representative sample is tested at this. If you add other things on there, or even why not add a link, an RFID or something, a link to the third party lab COA. Then the customer can actually look at the COA, and we can help provide education on how to read that. We also have a simplified COA with bar charts and all that kind of stuff. And
Cool.
and because mainly you may not really need to understand all the contaminant testing. You may, oh, mercury, why is mercury even in this cannabis, you know? But there's limits and levels that have been tested by other regulatory bodies that feel if you're inhaling, if you're ingesting, these are the safe limits for a contaminant. Cannabis is not a sterile product, nowhere near. It's got a nice natural microbiome, and that is what is going to produce a healthy plant. So with regards to understanding the contaminants, I don't think that's a huge part. You should know that it's passed, it's clean.
Right.
But we need to provide, I think, more education and visibility on the terpenes and the cannabinoids, and on what other cannabinoids may do. You may have this particular product that's higher in CBG, or, you know, the CBD, or I'm a fan of balanced flower too. A nice 1-to-1 with high terpenes, I think is awesome. Especially daytime, and that kind of a smoke is great. So, and then extracts, making extracts, and you're almost able to, I don't mean manipulate, but you're able to somewhat control the inputs going into that extract. And something like behind myself here, that's from Colson's Cannabis. That's the animal face live rosin that was grown by Carmel. So those are high quality products, and there's other producers out there that are also doing high quality and awesome solvent products. This one's a solventless one. They're both equally great, as long as we provide the education on why they're equally great, and what's in these terpenes and this myrcene and farnesene and all this kind of stuff. I think that will go a lot longer way than just adding more stuff on a label, or making them display differently. Things like one thing that was recently come to light from a few different labels is putting the harvest date as well as the package date, where everyone is just putting package date right now. And a lot of people online are saying, well, I need to see the harvest date, because it doesn't matter when they harvest or when they packaged it, when did they actually harvest it? But then, as one LP mentioned, well, but it doesn't take into account that I cure it for 30 days. Okay, so that's where we need to be able to have more flexibility to add more things on the label. And even better, I still think that link to a third-party COA, that'll help a lot, I think.
I agree with you definitely, because that communication and the education behind the grow method, it might actually even as far as market base goes and consumer base goes, it might resonate with other growers, people that haven't come out saying they grow even, right? Like just preferred method, preferred style, or like myself, it might even, if that's on their website, even as if it's not like on that COA, but or access to it, if it's on their website, which I try to commonly visit with my reviews, I like to take note of that. And it's not a common thing, but the odd brand will put on their website their growing methods, their preferred methods, how it was, whether the style of feed, this natural light or not, and you know what I mean, flushing, all of that. So
yeah, absolutely. But
part of it,
the one thing to add on to that too is that, you know, back in the old days, the legacy days, we never got any of that information. Pretty well, the only thing we may have got was indoor or outdoor, and possibly strain name. Other than that, you didn't have much. But everyone was hiding and incognito and that kind of stuff. Now on the legacy market, a lot more brands, and there's certain great ones, like even Kind Selections. You know, he's a guy that's doing testing and putting it on his labels. That's awesome. I'm so happy to see that. That's helping more for the education on both sides of things, right? We all want the same thing. We all want quality products to the consumers that need it, whether it's medical or therapeutic or recreational or whatever. But I think that now that we're able to offer more education, and we're working on an education side of things as well too, kind of a third party education that I think will help as well. But also Health Canada or the provincial bodies, I believe they need to be doing more to educate the consumers as well, because especially if you want now it to be open to everybody of legal age, we'll say, other than certain children with that have a medicinal need. And that was one of the reasons we chose Sick Kids Foundation for our golf tournament that we did, a charity golf tournament fundraiser. Yeah, so we chose Sick Kids for a few reasons, but one of them was that they had a program, an R&D program, where they were testing the use of cannabis on children who had certain medical ailments, not just the common one that we've all seen, like in Charlotte's Charlotte, for seizures, a certain type of epilepsy, for example, right?
Yes, Asperger's, right?
Yeah, so it was great to see that they were taking some initiative, and we've offered to help in any way we can. So it is nice, and I hope more places like Sick Kids will be able to do stuff, not just for children. They're obviously focused on children, but for anyone that can benefit from the use of cannabis or cannabis products. Be happy to provide them with education and get the word out there that this is not, some dirty street drug.
Exactly, man.
The cannabis plant is got so many different uses, and you even mentioned even hemp, and which is cannabis, just less THC, for textiles. My wife is a textile designer, and she purchases some quality hemp material as well, makes some of these hemp beanies and all this kind of stuff. And it's really cool. And the usage for rope and for paper, and instead of cutting down these forests, seeing what they're doing in BC is ridiculous right now with the old growth. So I wish we had more hemp farms, just even for textile and rope and paper and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but without the education, it's difficult, right?
That's without getting it out there, man. It's just us on the phone kind of deal, but so that's it. We're taking it. Look where we've done. Hit those markers, man. Today, this is a beautiful discussion, straight education. I've learned a pile of things from you in this short time. I've learned of a few places I plan to visit on the brick and mortar style in the farm gate. Definitely want to look more into what Ontario's trail like. I came at you with one, man. You've spit off 6. So I mean, already that statistics is worth getting out now. So that's the little things that I do. I'm here at home today, wrapping things up. I just wanted to bring it down full circle. So as far as outside of the regulations go, in the meantime, that education, Decolonize Cannabis, the platform that stands for that, smashing stigma and getting the proper education out to all of the appropriate audiences. And we're family gentlemen here, as we mentioned. My wife supports what I do as well. We're both looking at working together, how we do that now and what we do in the future, and everything coming together that way, full swing. And in the meantime, what I'm going to be rocking hard for is the Decolonize Cannabis platform. And that's just, what it is. It allows people to come to and that's what I like to ask in closing some of these things as far as that goes. Then I have one kind of off the wall question, but I'd like to hear your professional scientific opinion on it. But one, ultimately, what we're doing, it makes sense. Does it make sense to your colleagues in preparation for the episode and explaining what we do here in Manitoba, that we've now reached out to a North American audience, and that ultimately that is what we're doing here. We're not looking for monetary. Ultimately, like you said, man, it's a beautiful situation. If anything we could ever do is help other people in those situations, whether it's generating funds for their projects or getting involved in the actual movement, the culture, the community movement, and continually paying it forward this way. So that one, I'm here interested to know just where you stand with this type of platform, and if it benefits you guys in the future. I would love to channel your educational stuff always through our platform. We're always going to be here for you for that, man.
Yeah, thank you. I would love to do more of this kind of stuff, and anything to spread the word that, you know, cannabis is not a dirty street drug, and how we can benefit from it. The decolonized cannabis, the breaking, the smashing the stigma, breaking the stigma. There's multiple different groups out there that are trying to do the same type of thing, and we need to just kind of get together, and completely get rid of the stigma around it. And if it's podcasts, if it's webinars, education, whatever the case may be, I myself, John, High North, we have our full support in that. We only want to see cannabis get bigger and better out there, and not just in Canada. And the fact that it's treated the same as, say, fentanyl in the States federally is ridiculous, right? So the opioid crisis too, and how can cannabis help with the opioid crisis? And because there is, you know, a lot of people that are dying from this opioid crisis, and perhaps instead of being prescribed all these opioids, maybe they could have been prescribed some cannabis, or a cannabis topical, or even cannabis pills, or anything like that, right? And not saying everyone should be smoking a joint, but usage of cannabis in a proper way to help alleviate any of the symptoms that they may be having, or even PTSD in veterans and stuff like that, right? I think it would go a long way in the world if that was an option. They may not like it, it may not be for them. That's okay. But at least if it's an option,
Exactly.
instead of having to go to a street corner or something like that, right? I'm not talking in Canada, just internationally. Then I think it will go a long way, and will help benefit the world. And the fact with hemp, and reading those stats on growing hemp for paper versus trees for paper is just crazy. The fact that the government in multiple countries, not just Canada, haven't stepped up to do more and give more farmers incentive to be growing cannabis as a crop for, say, like I said, for paper or textiles or whatever.
Right off the bat in agreement, right? Like
Yeah,
right out of the gate.
it's crazy. And I think that's where we really need to be heading, in all types of directions: medical, recreational, and industry for hemp, and all that kind of stuff. So I hope that, I'm not sure if that answered what you're asking.
It does, John. Yeah, Rick.
Okay.
Sorry, it does absolutely, man.
Okay.
No. And you even hit on again another point. It's come up in your like you're. I know you're a scientist, man. You're in a lab, so it makes sense for this type of information to come out. And then I think in our phone discussion, I brought it up, but I spit it out the other night on the North American Weed Tour, and my response in some of this discussion that I'm looking at, and I brought up to you, is the human responsivity. So you've mentioned the ECS. We all have an ECS. It all responds differently to different products. You and I might obviously respond differently to, we might say, so that's exactly where I'm going. And I brought it up, but you and I generationally looking at biodome. And you brought up, and another discussion here today was the test study involving children, medicated children. So, I mean, when and if, is that from that perspective of your involvement to stuff in the Canadian cannabis industry, and even looking at it to the, or is it whether it would be a WHO level of involvement in that? But that exactly, when is the industry going to be looking at that type of the human study specifically, so that we could dialect also on that, not only a standardized system that now we're looking at a tag that we both understand that this flower is exactly what it is, and in this extraction form, this is what it does. But when and if ever the human trial studies are going to say, this is your ECS, this is my ECS, and this also tells us how our ECS will respond to this product.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll ever be able to do that, because everyone's ECS is so different, and their metabolism and all that kind of stuff, right? So but I think that we can be doing better to get closer to that, for sure. I'm just not 100%. There are human trials going on, some in Canada and some in other, Israel, even, and some in other countries like that. But there's not enough funding behind it because of the government, and like the States, as I mentioned, it's federally illegal there. I did hear that they're now building the third licensed facility from federally licensed facility in the States for R&D. The first one is in something like Georgia or Alabama or one of those states down there. And I've seen pictures of what they're producing there for these human trials. And it looks like hay. It looks absolutely terrible. So unfortunately, they're not taking it seriously. I think they're just kind of ticking a box. Yeah, we do some trials over there or whatever, right? But they're not taking it seriously. And that's where the government or the medical, like public health or whoever it would be, need to take it a little bit more seriously, need to provide some funding. I believe they do, but I don't think it's enough. We're not involved in any human trials, so I'm not very up to date on that here in Canada. But I do see some of the results from some of the studies, even certain things like my wife is part of a Facebook group that this girl, Ashley Brown, called She Can, and she's done a great job of this group. But it's all, unfortunately, it has to be all like behind closed doors. They have to use the broccoli emoji, all these things like that, because Facebook will shut it down. Yeah. And there's not enough research. They go in there and they say, for migraines, I tried this product from the Atlas transdermal patches, for example, and it worked great for me. And this girl said, oh, it didn't work great. And all these other ones, yeah, I tried it here, I tried it like that. And that's how they're communicating, and that's how they're medicating themselves, by a Facebook chat group that Ashley created, and which is awesome. But unfortunately, why is there not a better option? Right? Why are they having to put broccoli emojis and not saying weed or whatever buzzword is going to shut the group down? And it's only for the benefit of everyone, benefit of all Canadian, the population here in Canada. If they have, I don't know why the government doesn't see that incentive. If she's got a migraine and can't leave her house, she's not using gas, spending money at the store, this and that, bringing more income and spreading the wealth around the country, because she's stuck at home in a basement with a migraine. So why the government is not stepping up is beyond me. But I hope that eventually that will change. But we'll see. It needs people like yourself to help get the word out there and to decolonize cannabis, as you say, right?
Absolutely. I was just going to say the same thing about you, Rick. Man, I appreciate your time today. I think everyone's going to appreciate it. Volume 2, Episode 1 premiere, my man. You nailed it. It was beautiful. I hope your colleagues give you I hope they got a steak supper for you tonight, man, and I'll pat you on the back and run you through a line of high fives, buddy. You deserve it for sure. Decolonize cannabis, everybody. www.ventureslimited.com. Check out our website. Follow us on YouTube, Anchor FM, Spotify, and everything else will be going up on the premiere post. So any last words, Rick? I'll leave it with you to close out, man. Any love you want to throw out there? Anything else?
Yeah, just thank you very much. I appreciate you reaching out. I appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you and to be on Episode 1, Volume 2 of your podcast. I'm looking forward to seeing it online and helping share and spread the word.
All right, man. Take care. Talk to you again.
Thank you. You too.